The workshop still smelled like her. I know that sounds strange. Eleanor never set foot in my workshop more than a dozen times in 41 years of marriage. She'd stand in the doorway, lean against the frame with her arms crossed, and tell me dinner was ready, or that her sister had called, or that the gutters needed cleaning before I got lost in whatever I was building. She never came inside, never touched the tools. But somehow, 2 years after I buried her, I could still catch her perfume in there between the sawdust and the machine oil, lavender and something warmer underneath. I never told anyone that. They wouldn't understand. And honestly, I wasn't sure I understood it myself. I was sanding a corner cabinet I'd been working on since January when my phone rang. I almost didn't answer. I'd been getting better at not answering, at letting things wait, at moving slowly through the hours the way Eleanor always said I should. "Frank, you've been in a hurry your whole life," she used to tell me. "One day you'll learn to just be somewhere." I was learning. 2 years late, but I was learning. The number on the screen was Ray Kowalski's. Ray had been our neighbor for 26 years, a retired civil engineer who mowed his lawn in straight diagonal lines and brought us tomatoes from his garden every August. His wife Margaret and Eleanor used to sit on the back porch together on Saturday mornings and talk for hours about things I was apparently never meant to hear. When Eleanor died, Ray came over and sat with me on that same porch without saying a single word for 40 minutes. Just sat there. "That's the kind of man he is," I answered. "Frank," his voice was careful. "The way you get careful when you're carrying something fragile. I need you to come over. I found something in Margaret's shed that I think it belongs to you. I think Eleanor left it there." I set down the sandpaper. "What kind of something?" "Come over," he said. "And Frank, don't mention it to Nathan first. Just come over." I didn't ask why. There was something in the way he said my son's name that told me not to ask. I hung up, washed my hands at the utility sink, and walked across the yard to Ray's back door. He was waiting for me in the kitchen. Margaret was there too, sitting at the table with her hands folded, and between them was a metal lockbox I recognized immediately. It was the same one Eleanor kept in the bottom of her closet under a stack of old sweaters. I'd always assumed it held insurance documents or old photographs. I'd never asked. Some things in a marriage are understood without discussion. That box was hers. Margaret slid a key across the table toward me. Small brass key on a pink ribbon. "She gave this to me 2 summers ago," Margaret said. "She made me promise not to give it to you until you needed it. She said I'd know when." She paused. "I know when, Frank." My hands were steady when I picked up the key. I don't know why. Maybe because part of me had been waiting for something without knowing what I was waiting for. Inside the box was an envelope with my name on it, in Eleanor's handwriting. Underneath the envelope was a small notebook, the kind she used for grocery lists and phone numbers. And underneath the notebook was a folded piece of paper that turned out to be a copy of our property deed, with certain sections highlighted in yellow. I opened the envelope last. The letter was 4 pages, front and back, dated 14 months before she died. Eleanor always wrote the same way. She talked direct, unhurried, like she had all the time in the world and expected you to keep up. "Frank," it began, "if you're reading this, then I wasn't able to tell you myself. I want to start by saying that I am not angry. I want you to know that before anything else, because what comes next might make you angry, and I need you to stay level. You know how you get. Stay level." I almost smiled at that. I have been watching our son for the past few years, and I have been watching his wife for longer than that. And I need to tell you what I see. Nathan loves you. I believe that. But Nathan has been listening to Diane for a long time now, and Diane has been whispering things in his ear that have changed the way he looks at us, the way he looks at what we have. She has asked him twice about the house. Not in front of me. I overheard once from the hallway, and once she made the mistake of saying something to my sister Carol, who told me, "Diane wants Nathan to help manage your finances when I'm gone." She used those words, help manage. She has talked about the house being too much property for one person. She has talked to someone at Millbrook Crossing. I know because Mrs. Henley's daughter works in their admissions office and recognized Nathan's last name. Millbrook Crossing was an assisted living facility 12 miles away. Nice enough place. I'd driven past it. Never once considered it for myself. I folded the letter and pressed it flat against my knee. Ray and Margaret weren't looking at me. They were giving me whatever privacy three people at a kitchen table can give each other. I need you to understand, Eleanor had written, that I am not telling you this to make you hate them. I am telling you because I know you, Frank. I know that when this starts, and it will start, probably within the first year, you will assume the best of people the way you always do, and you will not see it until it has gone further than it should. You see the best in Nathan because you love him. That's not a flaw. But love can make you slow. Open the notebook, read every page, then call Dennis Hobart. Dennis Hobart had been our family attorney for 18 years. I didn't read the notebook there at Ray's kitchen table. I thanked them both, took the box home, and sat down in the kitchen, not the workshop, the kitchen, where Eleanor had spent more of her life than anywhere else, and I read every page. She had been thorough. My wife had been extraordinarily, methodically thorough. The notebook contained dates, conversations she'd overheard or been told about, a list of questions Diane had apparently asked a financial advisor friend of hers about what happens to jointly held property when one spouse dies. Notes from 2 separate conversations with our attorney Dennis, whom Eleanor had apparently consulted without telling me. A page that listed every significant asset we owned: the house, the investment accounts, the life insurance policy, the small rental property in Claremont we'd bought in 1998 with her own handwritten notes about what she wanted done with each one. And at the very back, a single page with 4 words underlined twice. Do not trust Diane. I sat with that notebook for a long time. The kitchen clock ticked. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, the neighbor's dog barked twice and went quiet. I was 64 years old. I had spent 31 years as a structural engineer before I retired at 62. I had designed load-bearing systems for buildings that still stood in 4 states. I had raised a son, buried a wife, maintained a house and 2 vehicles, and a workshop full of tools I knew how to use. I was not a man who needed help managing anything. But I understood, reading Eleanor's notebook in that quiet kitchen, that none of that would matter if I didn't pay attention. I called Dennis Hobart the next morning. He wasn't surprised to hear from me. Eleanor had apparently told him I'd call eventually. He said that in his exact words, and I heard the warmth in it, the quiet affection people carry for a woman who plans ahead, who thinks clearly, who loves someone enough to protect them from beyond a grave. Your wife was a remarkable person, Frank, he said. I know that, I said. We met in his office 3 days later. I brought the notebook. He had his own file. Eleanor had given him documents, instructions, a handwritten letter outlining her wishes. She had been his client independently of me for the last 2 years of her life. I had not known that. It didn't hurt me the way it might have once. It was just more evidence of who she was. How much do you know about what's been happening with Nathan? Dennis asked. I know what Eleanor wrote. I haven't seen anything myself. He nodded slowly. About 8 months ago, Nathan came to see me. He said he was concerned about your ability to manage the estate independently. He used the word vulnerable. He asked whether Eleanor's passing had changed your legal capacity in any way. Dennis paused. He also asked whether there was any mechanism by which a family member could be appointed to oversee financial decisions for an aging parent. The word aging sat in the room between us. He's 37 years old, I said. Yes, I'm 64. I ran a 12-person engineering firm for 19 years. I know, Frank. What did you tell him? I told him that your legal capacity was not in question and that there was no mechanism applicable to your situation. He thanked me and left. Dennis folded his hands on the desk. He came back 6 weeks later with Diane. She did most of the talking that time. I looked at the window. Outside, a woman was walking a small white dog. She was old, older than me, and she was walking fast, purposefully, like she had somewhere to be. What do you need from me? I asked. Dennis told me. Over the next 6 weeks, I did exactly what my wife had asked me to do from the pages of a notebook she'd filled 2 years before she died. I was methodical about it. I didn't rush. Eleanor had told me to stay level, and I stayed level. I updated my will. I restructured the investment accounts. I established a trust for the Claremont property, with terms so specific that no one could touch it without a legal battle they would not win. I changed the beneficiary designations on the life insurance policy. I documented everything, every asset, every account, every decision in a format Dennis kept on file. And then I waited. I want to be clear about something, because I think it matters. I did not want to believe what Eleanor had written. I read that notebook, and I wanted to find a different explanation. Nathan was my son. I had coached his Little League team. I had driven him to his first job interview and waited in the parking lot because he was nervous. I had walked him down the aisle at his wedding 8 years ago and shaken Diane's father's hand and thought, this is good. This is how a family grows. You don't stop loving someone because they disappoint you. That's not how it works. But you learn to see them clearly, and seeing clearly is its own kind of grief. The first real move came in October, 2 months after I'd sat in Dennis's office. Nathan called on a Sunday evening, which was unusual. We talked on Sundays sometimes, but usually in the afternoon. A Sunday evening call had a different quality to it, more deliberate, like something that had been scheduled. Dad, Diane, and I were talking, and we want to come see you. Have dinner, just the three of us. There's some stuff we want to discuss. What kind of stuff? A pause. Just practical stuff. About the house. About your situation. We want to make sure you're okay. My situation? I had a functioning house, a paid-off car, 3 cords of wood stacked for winter, and a corner cabinet in my workshop that was coming along nicely. My situation was fine. Come Sunday, I said. I'll make the pot roast. They arrived at 6. Diane brought wine, which she usually didn't. Nathan hugged me at the door and held on a half-second longer than normal, the way people do when they feel guilty about something. I noticed. I put the pot roast on the table, and we sat down and talked about ordinary things for 40 minutes. Nathan's job, their vacation plans, a movie they'd seen. Normal dinner conversation. I let it breathe. It was Diane who brought it up. She waited until I'd gotten up to get more water. And when I came back to the table, she had her hands folded in front of her, in the way Eleanor had described in the notebook as her serious face. Frank, we've been worried about you, she said. Living out here alone. The property is a lot to maintain, and we were looking at some options. Places that have everything you need, community, activities, people your age, and we found this one place that's honestly beautiful. We thought we could take a tour. Just see. Millbrook Crossing, I said. The silence was very complete. Nathan's face did something complicated. Diane's expression didn't change, which told me more than if it had. How did you, Nathan, started? Your mother told me, I said. Not in person. She left me a letter. She told me you'd been asking around about it. Dad, we weren't. It's not what you think. We just want to make sure you're taken care of. I looked at my son across the table. 37 years old. Good man, mostly. Confused man, currently. Led by his wife in directions his father suspected he hadn't thought all the way through. I know you do, I said. I meant it. Nathan, I know you love me. I want you to hear me say that before anything else, because what I'm going to tell you next might sting a little. He went still. I am 64 years old, I said. I designed the structural supports for the Hendricks building downtown, which has been standing for 16 years without incident. Last spring, I replaced the entire back fence by myself over a weekend. I cook, I drive, I manage my own finances, I maintain this house, and I am currently building a corner cabinet in my workshop that is going to be very good when it's done. I am not confused. I am not struggling. I am not vulnerable. I paused, and I am not going to Millbrook Crossing. Diane opened her mouth. I held up one hand, gently. I'm not angry, I said. I want to be clear about that too, but I need you both to understand something. Eleanor and I built this life, every piece of it, and I will manage it the way she and I always managed things together, even now, because she left me everything I needed to do it right. I looked at Nathan. She knew, son. Your mom knew, and she planned for it. I need you to think about what that means. Nathan's eyes were wet. He looked away toward the window. Diane was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, We were only trying to help. I know, I said. That's why I'm not angry. We finished dinner. It wasn't comfortable, but it wasn't cruel either. Nathan helped me clear the table without being asked, the way he had as a teenager. At the door, he hugged me again, that same long hold as before, but different this time. Less guilty, more sorry. I didn't know she knew, he said, quiet enough that Diane, already at the car, couldn't hear. She knew most things, I said. He nodded. His jaw was tight. I'm sorry, Dad. I know you are. I stood on the porch and watched them drive away. And then I stood there a little longer because the night air was cold and clean, and the stars were out, and I had nowhere to be. That wasn't the end of it. I want to be honest about that. Things rarely end cleanly in one conversation, especially when money is involved. 3 weeks later, I got a call from a financial firm I'd never heard of, a man named Greg. Something very smooth, very friendly, asking about my investment portfolio and whether I'd considered consolidating assets under a unified management strategy. He mentioned Nathan's name within the first 2 minutes of the call, casually, like it was a reference. I thanked him for his time and hung up. 2 weeks after that, Nathan called again, more subdued this time. He asked if I'd thought about what we'd talked about at dinner. I told him I had, and that my thinking hadn't changed. He asked whether I'd considered that the house might be a lot to keep up with long term. I told him I'd replaced the water heater in September, and the roof still had 8 good years on it, and my long-term plans for the house were to keep living in it. Dad, you're going to be 70 in 6 years. I know how math works, Nathan. I just mean things change. People need different things as they get older. Your mother's father lived in his own house until he was 89, I said, shoveled his own driveway at 86. I come from similar stock. A long pause. Diane thinks, Nathan. I said his name the way Eleanor used to quiet, final, not unkind, but not open to negotiation. What do you think? Another pause. Longer. Something moving behind it. I think I've been listening to someone else's worry for so long that I forgot to think about what I actually know about you, he said finally. I didn't push that. I let it sit there, where it belonged. The last piece of it came in December, 4 days before Christmas. Nathan and Diane had planned to come for the holiday as usual. 2 days before they were due to arrive, Diane called, not Nathan, Diane, to tell me that they'd been discussing things, and they thought it would be better for everyone if they stayed home this year. She was pleasant about it. Diplomatic. The kind of pleasant that means something has been decided, and this phone call is a formality. I told her I understood, and I meant it. Not because it didn't hurt, it did, in the quiet, specific way that disappointments hurt when they confirm something you'd hoped wasn't true. But I understood that Diane was a woman who had wanted something, and had not gotten it, and was now establishing a new distance. I could not control that. I could only control what I did with Christmas. I called Ray and Margaret. They came over on Christmas Eve with a bottle of decent bourbon and a fruitcake that Margaret insisted was better than the ones I remembered, and she was right. Ray and I sat up until midnight talking about things that had nothing to do with sons or daughters-in-law or assisted living facilities. We talked about engineering and woodworking and the summer of 1987 and a fishing trip we'd taken in Montana that had gone spectacularly wrong in a way that was now, 30 years later, one of the best stories either of us had. On Christmas morning, I went to the workshop and worked on the corner cabinet for 3 hours. The joinery on the upper frame was giving me trouble, and I finally figured out what I'd been doing wrong. When I got it right, the fit was clean and tight, and I stood there for a moment and felt the specific satisfaction of a problem solved, which is one of the best feelings a person can have at any age. In January, Nathan called on his own. No preamble, no diplomatic framing, just, "Can I come see you?" Just me. He arrived on a Saturday afternoon. I made coffee. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where I'd read Eleanor's letter 6 months earlier, and my son looked at me with his mother's eyes. She'd given him those, the shape and the steadiness of them, and said, "I've been an idiot. Tell me what happened," I said. He talked for a long time, about how Diane had started talking about the house 3 years ago, after her own parents had gone through a difficult decline and left their finances in disorder. About how her fear, and he believed it was fear, genuinely, had come to sound like logic over time. About how he'd sat in Dennis's office, asking questions he was ashamed of now. Questions that had felt reasonable in the moment and felt like betrayal when he said them out loud. I kept telling myself it was practical, he said. That I was being a responsible adult, thinking ahead. But it wasn't that. I was listening to someone else's anxiety about her own parents, and I stopped trusting what I actually know about you. What do you actually know about me? I asked. He thought about it. Actually thought, which I appreciated. That you're the most capable person I know, he said. That you built half the things in this house. That you took care of Mom every single day for 2 years when she was sick, never complained, never asked for help, just did it. That you're not old, Dad. You're 64. That's not old. There it was. The thing Eleanor had known would be said, eventually, if I was patient. The thing she'd planned for. No, I said. It's not. We sat with that for a moment. Is Diane or the two of you okay? I asked. He looked at the table. We're working on it. She's not a bad person, Dad. She got scared and she made it about the wrong things. We're talking about it. Good, I said. That's what you do. I got up and poured us both more coffee, and then I went and got the corner cabinet from the workshop and brought it in and set it against the kitchen wall. It was finished. I'd done the last of the sanding and the finish coat the week before. Dark walnut, simple clean lines, the kind of piece that looks like it has always been in a room. Your mother wanted something for that corner for years, I said. I always told her I'd get to it eventually. Nathan stood up and looked at it for a long time. He ran his hand along the top edge, checking the finish the way I'd taught him to do with woodwork when he was 12 years old. It's perfect, he said. His voice was thick. It's pretty good, I said. He laughed. It sounded like relief. Here's what I want to say about Eleanor, and then I'll say what I have to say about the rest of it. She was not a dramatic woman. She did not catastrophize or worry out loud or spend energy on problems that hadn't happened yet. What she did instead was pay attention, quietly and continuously, for 41 years. She paid attention to Nathan, to me, to the people around us. She noticed things. She filed them away, and when she knew she was running out of time, she took everything she'd noticed, and she organized it, and she put it somewhere safe, and she trusted me to find it. That's love. Not the feeling everyone has the feeling, but the action of it. The daily patient work of actually knowing someone and planning for their good even when you won't be there to see it. I think about the day she gave that box to Margaret. What she must have said, what Margaret must have felt, receiving it. 2 women at a kitchen table somewhere, one of them preparing to die and arranging things so that her husband would be okay. I think about that more than I think about almost anything else. I miss her every day. I expect I always will. But I don't experience it the way I did in the first year, like a wound, constant and raw. Now it's more like the smell in the workshop, just present, woven into the place where I live. In March, I got a call from Nathan asking if Diane could come with him on his next visit. I said, of course. She arrived looking like a person who had rehearsed something, which she had. She sat down at my kitchen table and she apologized, clearly and specifically, without qualifications or redirections. She said she had let her own fears drive decisions that weren't hers to make. She said she respected me, and that she was sorry for acting otherwise. I told her I accepted that, and I meant it. We had dinner. It was awkward at first, and then it wasn't. Diane asked about the corner cabinet, and I told her about the joinery problem I'd had with the upper frame, and she listened with more interest than I expected. Turns out her grandfather had been a woodworker. We talked about that for 20 minutes. People are complicated. That's not a disclaimer, it's just true. Diane had done something I didn't like, and I hadn't pretended otherwise. But she was also a person with a history and fears, and a grandfather who had built things with his hands. And she was married to my son, and my son loved her. Eleanor would have known what to do with all of that simultaneously. She always could hold 2 things at once. I was learning. In April, Dennis sent me an updated copy of the estate documents. Everything in order. The will, the trust, the beneficiary designations clean, clear, unambiguous. Eleanor's wishes and mine, documented in language that would stand up to any challenge. I put the documents in the metal lockbox and locked it and put it back in my closet under the same stack of sweaters. Different contents now, same box. That spring, I started a new project, a bookcase for the living room wall, floor to ceiling, with a rolling library ladder on a track the way Eleanor had wanted for years and I'd always thought was impractical. I ordered the hardware. I drew the plans. I started on the frame in May and worked on it through the summer, unhurried, one piece at a time. Ray came over some evenings and sat in the workshop while I worked, the way Margaret used to sit on the porch with Eleanor. He didn't help unless I asked, and I didn't ask often. Mostly, he just drank his coffee and read a magazine, and occasionally made a comment about the joinery or the wood grain selection that was actually useful. I didn't tell him that, mostly because he'd start having opinions about everything. Nathan called every Sunday, afternoon now, regular. Sometimes Diane got on the line for a few minutes. They were going to come for Thanksgiving, they said. The whole holiday. I said, good. And I meant that too. I want to be clear about something before I finish. I did not set out to punish anyone. I did not update my will or restructure the trust as acts of revenge. I did it because Eleanor asked me to. I did it because it was right. The estate will pass in the way we intended, most of it to Nathan, portions to 2 charities Eleanor cared about, a specific bequest to Margaret and Ray because they have been neighbors in the truest sense of that word. Nathan knows this now. I told him in March, and he nodded and said he didn't expect anything he hadn't earned, which was exactly the right thing to say. I don't know what the future looks like. Maybe there will come a day when I genuinely need help, when the house is genuinely too much, when the decisions I've always made alone should be shared with someone. That might happen. I'm not foolish enough to think I'm exempt from time. But that day is not today. Today, I am 64 years old. I wake up in the morning and I know what day it is and where I put my keys, and the difference between a mortise joint and a dovetail, and the names of every structural engineer I worked with in 31 years of practice. Today I am building a bookcase. Today I am tending the garden Eleanor planted along the south fence, which she designed so that something is always blooming from May through October. Today I am standing on my own ground, in my own house, living the life my wife and I built together. She asked me to stay level. I stayed level. Last week I finished the rolling ladder, got the track mounted, tested the wheels, ran it back and forth along the rail 6 times. Smooth and quiet, just like it should be. I stood back and looked at it, and I thought about Eleanor standing in this room, watching a library ladder roll along the wall of her house, laughing at the impracticality of it, loving it anyway. The wind came through the open window, and for just a moment I could smell lavender. I smiled and got back to work.